Today we're talking about how to create a strong brand. I brought on Dan Phillips, an absolutely amazing designer, has an iconic Canadian clothing brand that has been featured all over the planet, even in Ryan Serhant's closet on Million Dollar Listing New York. Dan actually created the prime real estate logo that is our company's logo, and we've been friends for over 20 years. We dig into the creating uniqueness in brands, how to actually work with designers, how to get your vision through a brand, and how to actually connect with your people. So if design matters to you, if you're a real estate agent, entrepreneur, maybe you're a designer yourself, I think you're gonna get a lot of insights from Dan, how he built his business and how he thinks about design and application. Let's go. You're a super interesting dichotomy from the standpoint that you're an artist, yet you have a business, right? And I think that's a good place to start the conversation in terms of like, how do you separate something that you love doing from something that can become work?
Yeah, it's honestly, it's the one thing I like about it is that it still keeps designs and like concepts and everything still fresh, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like a lot of people just get stale doing the same thing every day if you're just pumping out clothing or doing, the same sort of magazine layout or whatever, the like restaurant logo. But when they can actually like do it all, it puts it all together and keeps it like the unique ideas. Like, so finally this summer we did a lot of like actual graphic kind of designs, which we started with and then kind of went away from, and it's cool to bring it back and have people appreciate like the art of it, right? Or it's like, then it ties back to the mock-ups. And when we do things and people just kind of like, they maybe think it's even real when we haven't even actually done it yet. And it's, so it's, and as that too, it's funny because creators or creatives are difficult at times. Yeah. So it's like, I can put my head into both situations as the business and as the creator.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. So like when you say a graphic tee, is that like the cowboy shirt?
Yeah, like the cowboy shirt, or even there's like another one with like a skeleton and a skull. Marty, come on. That we, that's like totally old school design for us, right?
You're good. Come here, buddy.
Marty.
You want a microphone?
But yeah, so like, that, like I said, that kind of design concept, or even carrying it into, I don't know, like this year when we did pickles and peppers, there's like a cartoon character on it that matches the brand of the guy who does them for us, Big D, but at the same time, it's fun to have that unique flavor put into our design as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So a lot of people don't know the backstory. Dan did the original logo for Prime. We've, been friends for a very, very long time. I think you're known throughout the city as somebody that, has created an iconic clothing brand. We just joke that, Ryan Serhant, a lot of people know that he's been on the podcast, friend, mentor of mine, has one of your shirts hanging in his closet. It was featured actually on one of the shows that they did on Million Dollar Listing. How do you maintain the purity on the art side of things as a designer when the business can sometimes take over? Because I find sometimes creatives lose that piece because they're chasing the money, right?
Yeah, it's I'm still working on it, I guess, right? It's the passion. It's like what puts in the long hours and keeps me going, I guess. Like a lot of people don't realize that when they come here, like I always say, I'm like, my real job is doing design work. Okay. This is kind of like, it's still obviously a real job too, but the design work is kind of like my bread and butter. And it just goes with it. It pairs well with like, with the design. It's because it's all design, really. Yeah.
And let's break into the like components of design. So like iconography, typography, there's things, and like you were talking about like weight before. Yeah. So can you break down some very simple principles about design as if I was like a fifth grader? Because I feel like that's my education level.
So, I mean, with the programs especially, I guess it would be one way of breaking things down. So it's like, you use like people know the name of like Photoshop, right? So that's where you alter and create like, or I guess, let me try to go here. So uniqueness, I guess, is number one, right? When you're designing things and being original with it,
Sure.
adds to that. And then when you have like one, I'll just kind of use it as a brand maybe. So it'd be like a lot of people, they start a brand, cool word. They think it means the same thing to everybody, or like, you know, I'm just going to slap this on absolutely everything.
Sure.
And that's not really a way of making a brand. That's putting something on a t-shirt or a hat.
Yeah.
At the same time, then you take that, and then how do you make it more unique? So then when we first started, we were using, say, products that were a nice, like sustainable, good quality t-shirt, not cheaping out on, say, you know, Gildan, which back in the day everyone associated being really cheap and bad. So then you go from taking this unique kind of brand or design or style, and then how do you make it kind of more, and then from there, how do you even make it more, and then that turns into designing of how you're marketing it as well.
So uniqueness, like if I take the word prime, it would be creating like legitimately one of one version of that word,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like totally. And then that's where, you know, tying into typography or editing things or kerning. So making sure the letters are nicely balanced, or how does you know, if you look at a word, essentially it's going to be a shape, right? So how does this shape how is the shape going to be recognizable versus just a word?
Interesting. And then, so looking at uniqueness of, say, a word, where does iconography come into it? Because I think there's an evolution where the icon's almost as important as the word, right?
Yeah, and then even too, if you look at like as an icon, as like an app, even too on your phone, right? So if you take something that's going to be, you know, super recognizable on a larger scale, blow it up the size of a building, but then when you shrink it down to be
Instagram profile picture,
a centimeter or half a centimeter on your app, you still have to have the same feeling without losing the details and simplifying things. It's like friends of mine, like tattoo artists, I've heard them say, you know, traditional tattooing, or like that style, kind of what can you take away from it, make it a little bit less and make it simpler, and you know, without so many details in it. You can still take your traditional, say, like panther head or, you know, dragon or whatever, and if you're adding a little bit less to it and you're still getting the same feeling, even if it was like a flash piece, they could do that 10 different times and it could always be different, right? Yeah.
Mercedes, for example, like I remember looking at like the old logos and they were super intricate, and like they've simplified it, right? Is that just like a natural thing in the design world that's happened?
I think it just happens. I mean, you kind of, and there's trends too, right? So it seems to be now a lot of, say, apps and, you know, social media platforms, it seems to be the trend of doing just like black with white, which, you know, say 3 years ago or whatever it was when Instagram rebranded, and it was that rainbow color. Right, so you still have to go with the trend of it, but then you look at, say, a brand like Coca-Cola, and they've had the same logo since, or McDonald's, and then you always have brands like, say, Burger King or Pepsi, who are always reinventing themselves, and then even too, they kind of go back to maybe a simpler time with Burger King, is now like the old school orange and like coral, simple Burger King in a bun.
Yeah, well, I mean, that evokes emotion, right? So like you talk about uniqueness. When you think of like things from our youth, when we look at like logos that we recognize as kids, whether it be an old Nintendo or whatever that would look like, I guess, how do you evoke emotion if people are watching this and they're like, I want to create a really cool logo that makes people feel like, X, right? That's like going to Home Depot and being like, I need this screw. Like, how do you draw emotion?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough thing, and that's I mean, with the whole feeling of the brand outside of design on how it's, or I guess what you're making and how you're selling it or marketing it or what products you're putting out. But just to backtrack, I'm even thinking it's like Starbucks. You know, you look at the first intricate like mermaid, and realistically, if you just put a green circle on a white cup, you're gonna think it's Starbucks.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right. So I mean, for us, that's another thing too. It's like with the anchor, it is so simple that I always joke, like, how did nobody else ever think about this?
Yeah.
And you can just slap it on. Like, we have stickers to koozies to socks. I mean, obviously things are designed and catered to certain products are, you know, unique, but it's like, you know, that culture of the brand suits the logo.
Even like the shirts, right? It is, where is it on this one?
Yeah,
Right there. Like if you look at how small that label is,
Yeah.
I was with Ryan McLean. He's working on the agricultural side of our business. He worked at Frog.
Gotcha.
Apparently
Yeah,
everybody knows
Yeah,
everybody
yeah.
from Frog, right?
Yeah.
But it's so recognizable Question for you though, because I'm sure a million people have like tried to duplicate the anchor. How do you deal with that? Like, what do you do to keep yourself apart when people come after the brand?
Well, I mean, legally,
Yeah.
for one,
guess
right?
so,
Yeah. We've had people like knock it off before that we got wind of. I mean, it's like a form of flattery too. I remember somebody it wasn't necessarily a Canadian leaf, but they put something else on top, and they were selling it kind of in the same market. And it's like, you know, I'll just use like, it was a heart or something, right?
Sure.
And it's like, you know, super original. And that's the thing, like, I know an anchor isn't super original, but it's kind of combining the two things and solidifying it. But when other people do it, it's like I said, it's flattery, I guess. You know, it's funny too, because if people do just throw an anchor on something and people are like, oh, it's just like yours, and it's like, wow, it's an anchor, you know, or people will be like, hey, I got you this gift. You love anchors. It's like, well, sure, you know, like,
here's an anchor.
Yeah,
Bang,
yeah. Or my back tattoo, that, you know, I had the anchor on me a few times, and it's like, it was just a regular anchor, and I'm like, well, no, like, incorporate in a bigger piece, and I'm like, no, well, if I'm gonna have an anchor, we might as well put the leaf on top of it, right?
That makes sense. Yeah. I was talking to Ryan about this around videos, right?
Yeah.
Because he had noticed a pattern between a video we did, and there was an agent that did literally an exact duplicate of like, here's Justin's video, let's do it shot for shot. I'm like, it's flattery, like, it's gonna make me chase a different version of success, because our product on our platform is different than anybody can try and create. I think you guys have done the same thing, where I literally just picked this shirt up. I have every single color of this shirt since it's come out. We joke, you know, wear them with ties in a very corporate space, or I wear them with the t-shirt, and, you know, when I'm working on the truck or whatever at home. How have you kept growing from a design perspective? Because, like, you can build on principles, but I bet you it's a lifelong journey.
Oh yeah, it's nonstop. It's still kind of tying back to variations of things too, right? So if you can take that design aspect, and then how can you spin it to put it in or incorporate it into something else, or, you know, different sizing, or blow it up. It's like, you can even look at brands like, say, like Ralph Lauren, where, you know, they had the tiny little guy, and the next thing you know, it's like everyone already has that one, so then let's like oversize it on the shirt, right? Or then there's even kind of the trend of ties for men. It's like, you know, goes skinny, fat, you know, it's always changing, and end of the day, it's still going to come back to an extent. The world that we're living in now, say, everyone's kind of already done a lot of things. So how do you do it at the right time with trends, and building from what you've already done to, you know, tweak it to just make it a little bit more, or a little better each time, I guess.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
What artists, or where do you draw inspiration from?
Honestly, with the digital world nowadays, it's so easy just to look at stuff online from everywhere.
Do you go to like certain cities or certain types?
See, I used to travel so much,
Yeah.
and then each year we'd take that from, say, like the winter of me traveling, and then we'd kind of tie that into, you know, summer collection. But then at the same time now, it's kind of like nostalgic stuff, right? So looking at things that I personally have liked over the years, or you see kind of that old school approach. Like this year, like our bathing suits I'm looking at, it's, you know, just a solid, but it's nice, it's timeless, it's not going to go out of style. And that's kind of where I feel like we've evolved with a lot of the stuff, is it's all timeless stuff, right? Like if it's a black t-shirt with a white anchor on it, or the classic hat, it's not really going out of style, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be certain trends or different fit or whatever over the years, but ultimately the idea of creating something that will last, and, like, you know, you can piece it with other things. Like you're saying, you know, you wore a shirt from 5 years ago. It's still a staple for a lot of people. So if we can kind of keep doing that, I'd say that's kind of the goal, you know?
So when somebody's coming, I almost think of like layering clothing similar to probably how you're piecing together a brand, right? Where a lot of people watching this might be brand new to design and say, hey, I'm creating a company, it's going to be amazing, I need a logo. Half the time in my world, new agents especially, like, you don't need a logo. I'm like, you need to learn how to do the job and like read the contracts, and then eventually you'll be able to do that. But when they are at the point where they want to create a brand, where do you think they should actually be starting the process?
See, I'm with you with that, of actually being able to do the job first. I'd say that's number one. Then you solidify kind of what you're going for with this brand, or what design aspects of it. When I do design work for other people, I always ask, like, provide at least 5 to 10 different things, even if it's like, you want something, but you really like this album cover. Everybody has their own definition of what's cool, or it's like the classic kind of graphic designer thing, like, hey, make it red. It's like, okay, well, how's this color red? Well, no, I wanted it more this red. So if, pick what you like or what's going to represent or what you're going for, the emotions or feelings with it, because nobody can really read mine. Marty, buddy.
He's awesome.
Yeah. Like, you got to get in someone's mind to figure out what they want. And then even too, so that's what's beneficial in our situation is since I can actually create what I'm thinking, a lot of people can't necessarily do that.
Yeah. And, well, starting in like us as a case study in the beginning, I think we were very much like, well, big or small, we sell them all. We work with everybody. And we do really work with everybody. But then going through that thought experiment when I'm talking to you, I think for clarity purposes for people listening to this, I think telling you that like at this point in time, we aren't really for everybody.
Yeah.
The people that don't understand the value we bring actually don't really want to draw that customer in. But if people care about somebody that's trusted, connected, creative, and driven, those would be 4 words that would potentially be able to give you some direction.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And it's even, I think when we first got in here and we're shooting the shit, it's like, trust and passion and creativity go so far in every field from doctor, vet, real estate, design, even product and
surgeons, doctors, whatever.
Yeah,
right?
it's like, even like food too, right? I mean, it's like if you're going and you're buying and stuff and you can't read all the ingredients, what's the trust in that, right? So it does. Trust and honest and clarity, I guess, or, goes a long way.
Well, I texted a client of mine, a friend as well, Greg Wolf, the other day.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where do you get your steaks from? Because like I know he knows the spots,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah,
I trust him. And I think that's what you're talking about. Now, like the color science behind that, like when somebody says like we're trusted, we're creative, we're driven, like how do you show that with imagery that has no words?
That's part of the name of the game, I guess.
Is it trial and error?
It's trial and error. I mean, a lot of the time, certain clients are a lot easier to work with. If somebody has a mood, or you kind of get what they're.
Yeah.
If they're like passionate, they can really describe it to you. It's easier.
Well, I'm low energy, so you need to match me with that.
Yeah. But it's like it's tough when a lot of the time people don't know what they want.
Yeah.
Right. So then that's when the trial and error, or then, sometimes it can be frustrating too when you agree and everybody gets on the same page, but then they're constantly being like, oh, actually, we need to completely change it. Or a lot of the time too, other people can get in people's heads. So if they like something and that's the direction they want to go with, I mean, it is good to have like your kind of network to bounce ideas off. 100%, but it's like, if people are being too influenced and aren't sure what they want, it's almost like you have to just start again.
Do you know how many times I've done inspections and all of a sudden an uncle that bought a house once 24 years ago shows up and it all of a sudden is like an environmental auditor and inspector? Oh. It's kind of probably the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, I like design. I watched this show one time and let me tell you what I think, right?
Yeah. It's like, I got a guy who prints shirts. It's like, well, sure, and there's nothing wrong with that in a way, but it's, kind of one thing I've always stand with or believed in. It's kind of like, if you let the people who are good at something be good at it, right? Yeah. So it's like, trust the person if that's what they're good at, and there's no point of wasting your time to an extent. I mean, obviously, still learning and doing on your own, but if you can still step back and let somebody do what they're good at, I mean, it goes a long way too.
So natural progression, we talked about uniqueness, we talked about like maybe getting a voice behind your brand, empowering a designer to be able to execute. Going through the revision process, like how can you set people up for success so there's not a ton of back and forth?
So the one thing I always find with things is put it to practical use. So say if it's a beer or like a design on a beer can,
sure.
If you just send a flat, it's like 5x8, tall can size, you can't visualize what it's going to look like. So as soon as you slap it on like a mock-up, do a real thing, it shows what it's going to look like, because when you spin the can around, the graphic will go with it. That's one aspect. Or, there's also another thing. A lot of, they teach you and they say it's like, is that T-shirt cool, right? If you're doing a logo, like you said, with the Prime, put on a hat, people ask you for it. You put on a T-shirt.
Sure.
it's t-shirt cool, right? Would somebody actually wear it, regardless of what you're doing or your brand or whatever. It stands out if you could actually wear it on something. A friend of mine, our old photographer Braden, he started a pizza company, and he's making great pizzas, and he's got a really cool brand with it. And then for his like second pop-up, he slapped the logo on t-shirts.
Yeah.
And he's like selling t-shirts now.
That's
so it's like
fun.
as a pizza pop-up,
Yeah.
now you're also selling merch, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand that, and at the end of the day too, everybody wants to have their logo on a t-shirt when it's their brand, right? So it's like, that's another way if you're doing something completely different, or say it's a construction company or, dentist office or whatever it is, and you just throw it on a t-shirt, they're proud and passionate about it, that ups the level of them seeing, oh, cool, that's how it looks. Or even too, if you're doing like, billboard signage or a window decal, doing those mock-ups and putting it in practical use or looks like practical use goes a long way too.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about like even a sticker on a laptop, right? Or like an iPad. A lot of times the stickers that I'm putting, Eco Surf Shop, they're friends of mine. We did their lease down in Grand Bend. I put that on my coolers. I put it on my iPad with pride. And I think we do live in a world where once you develop something like that, you'll have people that are going to wave your flag. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's the funny thing too. It's like, I know people, it's like they love to like rep their buddy's brand or whatever, right? So it's like, say, if it's wearing like a burger hat, it's like, oh, this is my buddy's place, and it's like,
so-and-so,
yeah,
and
cool
yeah,
hat. And it's like, or even too, it's like, my dad plays in a band and they got shirts made and I did the logo, and it's like, I'm wearing big bandemic like shirt around, right? It's like, or I always joke, I always tend to wear like the bootleg shirts. So it's like not one of ours, but it's like I helped design it, or a brand I work for or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, why, you're not even wearing your own shirt. It's like, well,
But
actually,
it is.
I did. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, this is, but it's just not necessarily the anchor, right?
Somebody told me the other day, sent me a photo of a shirt that was very recognizable to both of us, and it was the Jim Bob Rays with the terrible fishing lure. I'm like, I have to buy that shirt just because of the fact that like a very subset of the population is going to understand the meaning behind that shirt,
100%.
but there's depth to it, right?
Yeah. It goes a long way, and it's like great conversation
Yeah.
piece. Like, last summer I bought up a couple like old vintage like Labatt shirts.
Yep.
And it's like Labatt Genuine Draft, and it's like an old like Fruit of the Loom made in Canada from like the 90s, and it's just like, I look at it, I'm like, Labatt's like staple in London. I'm like, it's just like a cool, someone's like, no way, like I don't even think they make Genuine Draft anymore, right? But it's like that cool kind of rad factor of, back to it, like your buddy's thing, or this nostalgic bar, or like an old beer or restaurant. It's just like making and pulling that out of nowhere to just to have something cool.
And I think it goes to like the depth, right? And having a story behind the brand beyond just, like you said, like be good at your craft. I shot a podcast earlier today with a friend of mine in the States. Like, you couldn't be further away from this guy in terms of like, he's in automotive sales, like he trains people, he's like public speaker all over the planet. This is what he does.
Yeah.
But you guys both said the kind of the same thing, where I feel like we're coming to a return of the age of the craftsman, where industrial revolution happened, digital revolution happened, the influencer revolution happened, and now people are kind of sick of that and they really want the humanity, right? And I think that's where you bridge the gap of really breaking down the human component of it through design. Like, you do have a way of translating.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it is. Well, kind of side or tied with that too. It's a lot of people say rely on that digital and things like Instagram and Facebook, which aren't the tools they used to be.
Yeah.
Right. So exactly now getting into podcasts or interviews, or like we were saying, it's like Zoom doesn't have the same effect of doing it in person.
Not at all.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, I think that's the thing, you have to balance everything. I mean, that goes with everything across the board too, but when you can, you're on here, you're doing this, you're doing that. It's like, we've always printed, we use our like beautiful photography and we put it on a postcards and incorporate in people's bags.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you're getting that hard copy, you're getting that touch feel. We use a nice stock for it. It ties everything in, and a postcard is an old school way of marketing.
Stickers, postcards,
right?
Like, I think being human cool again is kind of this phase we're going into. Even for this podcast, we've done tons of episodes virtually, but I said to Nico, like, we're going on a roadshow next year, because I've got tons of connections with really interesting people that do really interesting things.
Yeah.
We went to Tommy Waite's barn where he's now doing
Cool.
like a full cooking venue, and
Yeah.
like nobody really knows they're doing that other than like the people that are within their network, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the future of, you know, bringing forth your passion into your work and not necessarily separating the two. You know, once, to wrap up the design piece, now once somebody's worked with somebody, they've got a revision, they've got something they're happy with, a lot of times they feel good about that and then they just shelf it. How do you think people can use brands effectively, and then at what point should they be revising or upgrading their brand?
See, I think it's sometimes like a little frustrating piece with that is when you do brand up something or you do this whole design and this whole concept and it just gets used not the way that I or like the designer saw it panning out.
Sure.
Right? And it's kind of, once again, if they don't have a background in marketing or social media, or, you know, they're good at their craft, but they don't know how to properly execute the way that maybe you thought, and that's a way of just stepping back. I kind of forget what the...
No, like I think that, like, how can they effectively roll it out? Like, just delegate it, or like should they learn it themselves? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thing, or setting up like a guideline or a template, like we were kind of talking about with other things. Then that way, even if they don't really know, but they can at least still follow the same path, so it looks consistent and it comes off as the same consistency. Because the last thing you want to do is, if you're having multiple products and multiple outlets and everything looks different, how do you know which is which? Right?
You and I are going through this conversation right now about brand cohesion. Like, we really want you to, when you drive by and you see a Prime sign, whether it be on a luxury property, farm property, an investment property, you know that that's a Prime sign.
Yeah.
You may be able to identify what that property is separately because of the iconography or whatever that looks like. But again, it's maintaining continuity. And then you look at our team that's spread out all over Southwestern Ontario, like maintaining continuity of brand amongst an organization. Is that guidelines, or how do you roll that out to a team?
Like educating, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Marty, shut
He's
up.
fine.
Yeah, it's you know, kind of teeing someone up. You know, it's just.
So educating, like, you mean educating your staff in terms of
like how it should be, how you should perceive. It's just a way of keeping that consistent across. Like, again, like, it's just
how you put it on a letterhead, how you put it on an envelope.
Because and especially say like the things I was talking about with like a mock-up, if you're kind of seeing it, it's like, oh, that's how it should kind of look. As especially like maybe like an industry standard of, you know, that's kind of the norm. That's how it should look. That's how it should, you know, obviously still being creative on your own doing it, but still just having those guidelines and having that style to just make sure that it's consistent. Yeah.
What's exciting you in the design space moving forward? I know, dude. We're almost.
I don't know. A lot of people almost scared, I guess, or curious with AI. I guess that's a big topic in the world. I personally, I don't see it really. Like, obviously, it's using the tools that, you know, using everything. Use a little bit of it, but still being able to do it on your own. Or another thing too is like Canva, right? Obviously, you had it open, you know. But the thing is, what I found, say especially last Christmas, is there was a red, you know, with like candy canes and pine leaves and stuff like that, and I couldn't even tell you how many people I saw use the exact same one. So it is like a nice template to use and a good way of getting your message out. But at the same time, you can't just do what everyone else is doing. You still have to put your own spin on it. You have to put your own feelings on it. You know, if you change up the font, don't use the first one in the deck, or, you know, put your logo, or maybe, you know, you can change the color or shift it over a little bit so it doesn't look the same. Because I'd say so many people are getting into that. It's easy and it's good enough.
It's not. So AI, in my opinion, is going to expose like high school level work, right? Like the amount of people I see pumping out blog articles that are just AI. To me, I'm like, man, I'd rather put an article that was half the length, but I voice to texted it, or like, you know, it's my actual voice. You can use the tool to help you. Like, maybe you want to visualize 100 concepts that you don't want to take the time to mock up, and then you take the top like 10, and then you really dive in deep. I think like the 10% of you driving the boat, let AI automate the middle part, and then you come in and put the beautiful finishing touches on it.
100%.
I think that's where it's going to really elevate things.
Because
right?
it's like even like the chat GPTs and stuff, like I'll use it 100%. I'll be open about it. I'll type in exactly. I put in like 10, or it'd be like, give me a list. I'll put in like, give me a list of 50.
Yeah.
And then I pick through and I like mark a couple I like. And the next thing you know, though, I'm using, maybe say if it was like a sentence, like using part of this one, and putting my own spin.
Yep.
Because exactly, using
Not your
blog.
voice.
No, and using blogs, it's like now I can almost like read a post, I can read a blog, and I can see, I know the words. It's like tantalize your taste buds when it comes to restaurants. Like, and it's like that's what comes in every single time. And the way now too, how it's getting put on like every platform. So now our Shopify even has an AI for your product description.
Yeah.
MailChimp, here we could write your captions for you, or Hootsuite, they have an AI program too. And so many people are thinking that this is such a new or dangerous or scary, uncomfortable new space. But the thing is, look at like Google, look at your Siri, look at the shuffle of a song.
Yeah.
It's all being used. Now it's just more accessible to your everyday person. And it's how are you going to take those tools and use it moving forward?
Yeah, right? And I think you bring up a good point too, because I also think like good design and effort can make you stand out. Just like in my business, I'm not really smarter than anybody else, but I've been like consistent at a few really key things for long enough that it's unreasonable that anybody else would do that, and that's how we build our business. I think it's the same thing with work. It actually, like really good design can elevate a brand above the average, and the average is, I would argue, like 85% of the world.
Yeah. And with that too, it's what was I gonna get at with that? It's like with design, a lot of times, people don't see people don't see the hours that you put in to get to that point. So if you can do something at first try and it looks like you're really putting no effort into it, it's the time that you have, or it's like, the working on Saturdays and Sundays, working 7 days a week, or, It's like, that's the thing that a lot of people just maybe don't see. And they think using these tools like AI, like, I can just quickly do this. And it's like that get rich quick scheme, right? Where it's like, you have to do the work.
I'm a merch company, and then it lasts for three to 6 months, and then it just drops off, and they don't understand why. I heard a good story once. It was a guy who went to a factory. They got called. The machine broke down. This machine was like pumping out millions of dollars of product and just stopped. So he gets there. He looks at the machine and turns a screw, and then leaves. Machine works. Everything's great. Sends him a bill for $1,000, and the owner's like, "You came in. You turned one screw," and he's like, "Oh, don't worry. I'll send you an invoice." So he sends him an invoice. Turning one screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $999, right? And I think it's exactly what you just explained. So I think that's a good place to land the plane. I think if you're watching this, the lesson I'd want you to take away is that use a craftsman at what they do to do the thing that you want to accomplish, because there's a lot of depth and value in that. If you are somebody that loves design, then I would ask you to dig in deep. I'd ask you to connect with Dan. Check out his clothing brand. I wear it. And if you like Canadian well-built clothing, check out Illbury Goose. But on the design side, connect with Dan as well too. And if you're a new designer and you drew inspiration from this, reach out to him as well too, because he's a good dude. And I know that he'd probably be happy to connect with you and help you out as well.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Appreciate you making the time.
Yeah.
Awesome.